Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
What you'll hear are adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And These Are Your Stories. So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. One more thing. You just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by The Detective Story.
Hey, that's great. But you know what they say?
What's that?
Detective stories are a great solace, a sort of mental knitting where it doesn't matter if you drop a stitch.
Okay, that's stupid.
I know you are, but what am I?
Hello, Andy. Just found out you were traveling with me.
What do you want, Thomas? This is a private compartment.
Now, is that the way to greet your ex-partner?
Beat it, you crook. I'm through with your double dealing.
Yeah, what about that dough you owe me from the last take?
You've got a head like an elephant. Blow, brother. The air's getting bad in here.
Yeah? Now let me open the window then. I'll clear it out.
Hey, are you crazy? You'll blow us out of here.
Okay, Andy. Here you go.
Let go of me, you...
Yeah, good fellow, Andy. Just a few seconds, we'll be in the tunnel where it's nice and dark. And then I'll give you all the fresh air you want. Just a minute now, and we'll be there. I'll check. There you go.
Nothing like this ever happened on this railroad during my time, Mr. Thomas. Can't tell you how sorry I am about your friend.
It's all right, conductor. Not the fault of the railroad. Can't stop a suicide.
Well, what makes you think it was a suicide? He might have fallen out of the window when he tried to open it.
Yeah, that's possible, sure, but he looked pretty down the mouth when I left him to grab a smoke in the lounge car.
Well, why can you smoke in the compartment? That's the advantage of having one of these times.
Andy, my friend was a little touchy about the air in there, so I came out.
What happened after you went out for a smoke?
Well, I got into a business conversation with a few of the gentlemen in the lounge, but after a while, I figured I'd better be getting back to the compartment to see how Andy was getting along. As I came into the aisle next to the drawing room cars, we came into the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that Andy's room was only 3 doors away, so I felt my way along in the dark to his door. When I opened it, I felt a sudden rush of air in the room. I closed the door and tried to find the light switch, but I couldn't.
The train was still in the tunnel?
Yeah. I lit a match and saw that the window of the train was wide open. Andy's coat and hat was on the seat and his bag was on the rack. But he was gone.
I see. Well, that'll be sufficient, Mr. Thomas. I have enough for my report.
Okay. If you need me, I'll be in my compartment.
And please stay there, Mr. Thomas. For when we reach our next stop, I'm turning you over to the police for murder.
By what damaging slip in his story did Johnny Thomas prove to the conductor that he was the murderer of his former partner? In just a moment, we'll know. But first...
Yeah, what was the damaging slip that Johnny overlooked?
Wrong. You listen, but you just don't hear. Let me demonstrate. First the train, then the open window. Now you try and light a match.
Hey, it went out.
Of course.
Oh, I get it now. With that much wind, he would have been blown out of the car himself.
Oh boy. The light is on, but nobody's home.
Oh, does light have something to do with it?
And now, back to our story.
Are you crazy? What do you mean I murdered Andy? Prove it.
Easily. You said that when you opened the door to your friend's compartment, you felt a sudden rush of air in the room. That was true. But you then told me that you lit a match and that it stayed lit while you had time to notice several details in the compartment. And that's where your story fell apart, Mr. Thomas. No match would stay lit for more than a split second in the face of that rush of air sweeping in from the open window in the tunnel.
And I thought I had an airtight alibi.
That was your mistake. There was too much air.
Too much air. That's what you meant. The match, the wind, the light. It all makes sense now.
Abraham Lincoln once said, "It is better to keep silent and let people think you are a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt."
Is that a diss?
Yes, Ron, it was.
Is that you say?
Hello, and welcome to the podcast. It is Detective Week, and even our listener story today is from a real PI. We have a review of the audiobook, The Maltese Falcon, which is a story whose main character is none other than Sam Spade, private detective. Our featured story comes from the Golden Age of Radio series, Richard Diamond, private detective. And if that was not enough, how about a brand new Johnny Is It True detective fiction edition? So, let's get this started with an ode to Sam Spade. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Audible has sponsored the show now since July of 2019. We have reviewed more than 140 audiobooks, and the list keeps growing. Did you know that Audible has over 200,000 books available? And a lot of those are included in the free catalog. Audible is amazing, and it is the perfect companion to Ron's Amazing Stories. If you like this podcast, you're going to love Audible. So what am I listening to? The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. The private detective was a pretty big deal in the 40s and 50s. In fact, it was one of the top choices for radio, movies, and fiction in general. People just couldn't get enough. One could argue that continues on today with shows like Magnum P.I. and The New Perry Mason. But no one captured the character like Dashiell. He created one of the greatest hard-boiled detectives of all time, Sam Spade. Spade is the main character and the protagonist of The Maltese Falcon, just in case you didn't know. The Maltese Falcon was first published as a serial in the pulp magazine Black Mask. It is the only full-length novel by Hammett in which Spade appears. The character, however, is widely cited as the crystalline figure in the development of hard-boiled private detectives. My question to you is, have you ever read the book? If not, why not listen to it? Here is a clip from The Maltese Falcon.
Samuel Spade's jaw was long and bony, his chin a jutting V under the more flexible V of his mouth. His nostrils curved back to make another smaller V. His yellow-gray eyes were horizontal. The V motif was picked up again by thickish brows rising outward from twin creases above a hooked nose, and his pale brown hair grew down from high, flat temples in a point on his forehead. He looked rather pleasantly like a blonde Satan. He said to Effie Perrin, "Yes, sweetheart?" She was a lanky, sunburned girl whose tan dress of thin woolen stuff clung to her with an effect of dampness. Her eyes were brown and playful in a shiny, boyish face. She finished shutting the door behind her, leaned against it, and said, "There's a girl who wants to see you. Her name's Wonderly." A customer?" "I guess so. You'll want to see her anyway. She's a knockout. Sure in, darling, said Spade. Sure in. Effie Perrin opened the door again, following it back into the outer office, standing with a hand on the knob while saying, "Will you come in, Miss Wonderly?" A voice said, "Thank you," so softly that only the purest articulation made the words intelligible, and a young woman came through the doorway. She advanced slowly, with tentative steps, looking at Spade with cobalt-blue eyes that were both shy and probing. She was tall and pliantly slender, without angularity anywhere. Her body was erect and high-breasted, her legs long, her hands and feet narrow. She wore 2 shades of blue that had been selected because of her eyes. The hair curling from under her blue hat was darkly red, her full lips more brightly red. White teeth glistened in the crescent her timid smile made. Spade rose, bowing and indicating with a thick-fingered hand the oaken armchair beside his desk. He was quite 6 feet tall. The steep, rounded slope of his shoulders made his body seem almost conical, no broader than it was thick, and kept his freshly pressed gray coat from fitting very well. Miss Wonderly murmured, "Thank you," softly as before, and sat down on the edge of the chair's wooden seat. Spade sank into his swivel chair, made a quarter turn to face her, smiled politely. He smiled without separating his lips. All the V's in his face grew longer. The tappity-tap-tap and the thin bell and muffled whir of Effie Perrin's typewriting came through the closed door. Somewhere in a neighboring office, a power-driven machine vibrated dully. On Spade's desk, a limp cigarette smoldered in a brass tray filled with the remains of limp cigarettes. Ragged gray flakes of cigarette ash dotted the yellow top of the desk and the green blotter and the papers that were there. A buff curtain window, 8 or 10 inches open, let in from the cord a current of air faintly scented with ammonia. The ashes on the desk twitched and crawled in the current. Miss Wonderly watched the gray flakes twitch and crawl. Her eyes were uneasy. She sat on the very edge of the chair. Her feet were flat on the floor as if she were about to rise. Her hands in dark gloves clasped a flat, dark handbag in her lap. Spade rocked back in his chair and asked, "Oh, what can I do for you, Miss Wonderly?" She caught her breath and looked at him. She swallowed and said hurriedly, "Could you... That is..." Then she tortured her lower lip with glistening teeth and said nothing. Only her dark eyes spoke now, pleading. Spade smiled and nodded as if he understood her, but pleasantly, as if nothing serious were involved. He said, "Suppose you tell me about it, from the beginning, and then we'll know what needs doing. Better begin as far back as you can."
Now, just hearing that bit, you should be able to get a real feel for what you're in for on this one. Detective Sam Spade is hired to locate a client's sister by tailing her sister's companion. Spade's partner, Miles Archer, takes on the assignment, and quickly both Archer and the man he was shadowing are murdered. As Spade pursues the mystery of his partner's death, he's drawn into a circle of colorful characters, and they're all after a legendary statuette of a falcon that had been made long ago for King Charles of Spain. But not everything is as it seems. There is a big story, and the foul is afoot. Yeah, I know that's a bad pun. Now, if that appeals to you, head to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you can have the Maltese Falcon for free. Here is what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. This also grants you access to the included catalog, which is constantly updated with new titles. So, to download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Thank you, Audible. And now it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
Our story this week comes from Silas Hellman, who is a private detective in the Windy City, Chicago, Illinois. I've been holding on to this one for a bit now, looking for a place to use it. Since today's show seems to be all about the detective, I thought this was the perfect place. Silas has titled his story, "We're Only Doing Our Job." Hello, Ron. I have a story for you, but it's not paranormal. It's a plain old story that I thought I would share after hearing the one you told about two groups of undercover cops arresting each other. I am a private detective here in Chicago, and I've had that very thing happen to me. We were trying to gather evidence that a married man was regularly going out, cruising sites for gay hookups. Our client, his wife, had seen text from other men making references, but needed something a little more concrete. She was planning to divorce him and wanted this information as ammunition. One particular night, we pulled into a spot to make some observations. We saw a vehicle with a gentleman sitting in a reclined position, looking bored. Thinking that he was just another customer, we paid little attention, simply writing down the car registration for our records. There was very little going on that night, and we actually decided to check out a few other local hotspots to see if our subject was at any of them. Coming up dry, we went back to the original site, and as we drove past that car, we spotted someone else in the passenger seat, which my partner was convinced was a woman. Time passed, and we decided to call it quits for the day. As we drove off, the car came to life and began to follow us. My partner executed some evasion driving maneuvers to try to shake them off, but they stayed with us. There were some harrowing moments during that chase. We decided to divert to the local hospital to see if they would follow, and, if needed, to confront our stalkers. Always seek a public place to deter anything violent, and the best place is where people are. We parked, and our pursuers did the same. They leaped out of their car and pinned us in before we could even unfasten our seatbelts. My partner casually winds down his windows and says firmly, but politely, "Can I help you?" This man has the biggest Smith & Wesson Model 500 in his hand that I'd ever seen, and says, "We're undercover police officers looking into suspicious activity in the area." Unfazed, my partner and I pull out our IDs and say, "Well, we're private investigators on a case. We informed the local constabulary that we would be operating in the area out of courtesy. Here is the log number for the call." He and his companion's face, who was a woman, just fell. Clearly, they had been sitting for hours, hoping that we were guilty of something and could relieve their boredom. They confirmed our stories, sheepishly apologized, and got back into their car to resume their watch. Silas Hellman, Chicago, Illinois. Well, Silas, thank you for your story. The life of the private detective at times seems kind of ho-hum. But then again, I'll bet you were pretty charged up during that car chase. Well, that's it for this time. If you have a story that you want to share, like Silas did, head to the main website at ronsamazingstories.com. Click on the story submission banner, leave your story, give it a title, and please, tell me where you're from. I'll read it if I can. Our featured story this week is a detective drama. Detective fiction is one of the most popular genres and has been for centuries. But where did it come from? It can be traced back to the 1800s, around the time of the Industrial Revolution. Before this time, most people lived in smaller towns, worked and socialized in smaller circles, so people pretty much knew everyone they came into contact with, for the most part. But with the rise of the industrial jobs, more people began moving to cities, which led to interacting with more strangers on a daily basis. A heightened sense of suspicion and uncertainty, and yes, more crime. It was about this time, too, where police forces were first established. London's police force came into being in 1829, and New York City got its police force in 1845. With more people living in cities and crime rates on the rise, the setting was right for the detectives to be born. The first modern detective story is often thought to be Edgar Allan Poe's The Murders in the Rue Morgue, a short story published in 1841 that introduced the world to the private detective. The rest, well, it's history. Our story today is from the classic OTR series, Richard Diamond, Private Detective. It is one of my absolute favorites and is probably one of the best scripted radio series ever. More on that after the story. The tale is titled The Red Rose, and it first aired on March 2nd, 1951.
The makers of Camel cigarettes present Dick Powell as Richard Diamond, Private Detective.
Oh, the big red letters stand for the Jell-O family. Oh, the big red letters stand for the Jell-O family. That's Jell-O, yum, yum, yum. Jell-O pudding, yum, yum, yum. Jell-O tapioca pudding, yes, sirree.
Here transcribed is Richard Diamond, Private Detective, starring Dick Powell.
Diamond Detective Agency, the Ham and Mayhem.
It's mayhem.
Not if it ruins a gag. Hi, Helen.
Hi. What are you doing?
Oh, trying to spot a client. I've done everything to get somebody up here. Set traps. Hung out of the window by my toes. Nothing.
Oh, is it that bad, Rick?
Has been for a week. Can I come over tonight and cry on your shoulder?
I'd love it.
Better wear a bathing suit.
Are you going to cry that much?
No, but the bathing suit will sure make me feel a lot better.
You idiot.
Yeah, I can't help it. I try so hard.
Are you really coming over?
If I cry long enough, I'll work up a heck of an appetite.
I'll have Francis fix you a good dinner.
I'll pay you back for the first client I get.
We'll eat out?
No, I'll have Francis fix you dinner.
What time will you be over?
Mr. Diamond?
Rick?
Shh. I think I've spotted one.
Client?
I'm afraid to ask. I might scare him away.
Are you Richard Diamond, the private detective?
Are you interested in hiring him?
I certainly am.
Rick?
We just made a score, baby. I'll see you tonight.
Oh, wonderful. Bye.
Well, come in, sir. Come in. No sense in standing in a draft. Might catch pneumonia before we get around to my fee.
My name is John Alistair.
Well, sit down, Mr. Alistair. Pull up a wallet. A chair.
Thank you.
Now, what can I do for you?
Quite a lot, I hope. 2 days ago, I made arrangements for my own assassination.
Huh?
It's really very simple.
Well, so am I sometimes. Maybe you better be a little bit more specific.
Well, I was bankrupt, in danger of going to prison. I have a family, a wife and 2 children.
And an insurance policy.
That's right. If I was to be killed, my family would be well taken care of.
You said you were in danger of going to prison. Why?
Well, I'll be perfectly honest. I embezzled money from my firm.
Oh, embezzlement. Well, you can get a lot of years for that.
Yes, so I decided to do away with myself, leaving instructions for my wife to replace the stolen funds. She could live quite comfortably on the rest. I knew suicide would revoke the insurance policy, so I went to the only underworld character I knew, a man named Gimpy. A long time ago, he'd been my bootlegger.
Oh, yeah, I know him. Nearly poisoned me once.
I told Gimpy I wanted to hire a man to kill me, a professional assassin. Gimpy said it could be done, and I gave him $200. I told Gimpy to take care of the arrangements and not to tell me anything about the man who was going to kill me. I didn't want to know a thing, how it would be done or when.
Well, what do you want me for?
Well, something has happened. My wife's brother arrived last week from South America, a very wealthy man, and advanced me enough money to pay back the firm and make a fresh start.
Well, then go tell Gimpy to call the gunman off.
Have you read the morning papers, Mr. Diamond?
No.
Yeah, front page. Gimpy was shot to death last night.
Oh. Oh, it's kind of tough, then, to tell Gimpy to call it off, hmm?
I want you to find whoever Gimpy hired and stop him from killing me.
Find a man with the only clue to his identity lying dead in a morgue? He could be one of 50 professional killers wandering the streets. One of 50 who would make it tough to be found even if you just wanted the time of the day.
Can you find him?
I don't know. I can try.
You must find him before he kills me.
Well, I'll try my best. In the meantime, you stay here and lock yourself in.
In this office?
Yep, right here. Don't even let your wife know where you are.
All right, if you think it's necessary.
No, I think it is. And, by the way, I charge $100 a day in expenses. I guess his brother-in-law had given him enough money for a high-priced private detective because he handed me $100 and agreed to lock my door and not answer it for anyone but me. I left the office and headed for the Skid Row Bistro where Gimpy had died on the dirty floor. It was called the Black and Red, and the bartender was wearing an apron that looked like he'd been making hash on it.
Yeah, Gimpy got killed here. Right over there, the clean spot near the bar. He bled a little.
You know who gunned him?
What am I answering your questions for?
Because I'm asking him.
That ain't enough. I got a fetish for living.
I'm a private cop.
Well, that's the worst thing you could have said. You better buy a beer or take a walk, huh?
I'll buy. You don't even have to change the $10.
You think I'd tell you something for a lousy 10 fish?
Yeah?
Well, you're wrong. I don't know nothing.
You were in here, weren't you?
Yeah, on my stomach behind the bar.
You saw it start, didn't you?
You want me to tell you as much as I know?
Unless you want to play another tune. We could dance.
$10 for what I know?
You don't think it's worth it, huh?
Nah, but I seen the 10 and it made me greedy.
Okay, here. Live a little.
Thanks. Well, Gimpy was standing over there drinking a beer. These two guys come in, and one of them walks up to him.
What did they look like?
Two guys, big guys, hats, coats with the collars turned up, the whole bit. Looked like just what they was. This one guy started arguing with Gimpy about some money.
You hear the conversation?
Yeah, something about wanting all the 200. Well, Gimpy gets a little nasty. He was like that, you know, a nasty little guy. Well, the guy gets tired of arguing and pulls a gun. Gimpy tries to climb the bar, and he must have been halfway over when the guy cut him in two. By then, I was flat on my face waiting for mine. But these two guys took off, and I called the cops. Wait the 10?
You don't remember what either one of the guys looked like?
Nah, I was minding my health.
Okay, thanks.
Hey.
Yeah?
I don't know whether it means nothing, but the guy who killed Gimpy was wearing a small red flower in his buttonhole. A red flower like a rosebud. I remember it. Funny a guy like that should be wearing a pretty flower.
Oh, what do you want?
Why, Sergeant Otis, you've been taking your ugly pills again.
Can't you ever do anything without the department's help? I thought you were supposed to be a big, smart private detective.
Well, we all make mistakes. I thought you were supposed to be a gorilla.
Oh, you did, huh?
Yeah, but gorillas get bigger.
Oh.
Hello, Walt.
Hello, Rick. What can I do for you?
I got a little problem. Your department handle that killing over in the Black and Red Saloon?
Skid Row?
Yeah.
Yeah, a small-time guy named Gimpy got himself blown up.
Any line on the killer?
No, we questioned the bartender who runs the place. He was lying on his face. Couldn't give much of a description. We're checking up on Gimpy's friends and associates.
The killer wore a small red flower in his buttonhole. Maybe a rose.
How do you know?
Bartender told me. Thought maybe you knew about it.
Well, he didn't tell me. What are you interested in Gimpy for?
He contacted the killer. I've got to find the killer, and I don't know who he is.
You think maybe this guy with the flower is your boy?
Well, he might be. Bartender said he was arguing with Gimpy about $200.
Well, no, he didn't tell me that either. Just said they were arguing.
You should have slipped him $10.
What do you have to find him for?
Client.
You got a client who wants you to find a killer?
Yeah, and that's all I'm going to tell you. Now, give me what you got on Gimpy and his friends.
I don't know why I should.
Oh, stop pouting, fatty. I can't tell you anymore. Besides, if I find this killer, you solve the Gimpy killing, don't you?
Well, yeah.
Well, then let's have it.
Okay. Gimpy didn't have many friends. The only sure one we've come up with is a woman named Belle DeCanto. Runs a small dancing school.
Have you talked to her?
Yeah, but she knows less than the bartender. Here's the address.
Walt gave me Belle DeCanto's address, and I went over. It was an old two-story building on the east side with a rickety flight of stairs leading up to the dance studio. Belle DeCanto was sitting at the piano. I stood there smoking a Camel, watched one of her young pupils perform a pretty sloppy set of turns.
All right, Jeannie, that was fine. Over to the bar.
Okay. Hey.
Huh?
Oh, somebody.
Oh, what can I do for you?
I want to talk to you, Belle.
$20 for 10 lessons.
I just want to talk.
Why don't you take the lessons, mister? Gives you grace and balance.
I'd look a little silly in tights, dear.
Go do your exercises, Jeannie.
Okay, but I still think you'd look great in tights, mister. We could do Swan Lake and things.
I bet we could.
Talk him into it, Belle. He's real cute.
What do you want to talk about?
Gimpy,
You a cop?
private cop.
I entertained the whole 5th precinct all morning.
I'm looking for the guy who killed Gimpy.
I told the cops all I know. I don't know who killed Gimpy. Back straight, honey.
Okay.
I can't help you, mister.
You know a man who wears a red flower in his buttonhole?
Huh?
Do you know a man who wears a red...
I'm busy, mister. I got a lesson.
Look, Belle.
I don't know nothing. Now beat it.
Maybe if I bought a course of lessons.
I'm full out. Now get out of here. I told you to keep your back straight.
Okay, I'm keeping it.
Belle.
You gonna get out of here, or do I call the law?
Oh, Belle, what you throwing him out for?
You shut up and keep your back straight.
Listen, I'm paying good money around here.
Get out now, mister.
Okay.
What you climbing on me for, huh? So what are you yelling?
You get up there and do your bit, or I'll bust this cane over your skull.
You'll do what?
I told your old lady I'd teach you how to dance, and I will if I have to cripple you trying.
You don't yell at me like that.
Bye, you lovely people.
Bye, honey. You don't yell at me. I paid my money. Who do you think you are? Who?
Get up on that bar!
Drop dead.
It was pretty obvious my mention of the man with the red flower had set off Belle DeCanto's charming temper. And it was even more obvious that to Belle, the man with the red flower spelled some kind of trouble. The third and most obvious point was that I wouldn't get anything out of Belle even if I dropped her in a pit full of enraged mice. I started down the steps of the dance studio, heading for the street, and I stopped cold. Something on the third step set off little bells in the space in my head reserved for danger. There, on the third step, was a small red rose, and it hadn't been there when I went in. I stopped and thought about it. Maybe the man I wanted was in the building. I looked around. Only one other door besides the studio, and that led to Belle's apartment above. I went up there and looked around. Nothing. Then I got a pretty scary thought. Maybe the man with the red rose had tailed me, waited around listening at the door. If he'd found me, maybe he'd found my client. I spent the next 20 minutes making myself hard to follow, and when I was satisfied no one was tailing me, went back to my office. Alistair. Mr. Alistair.
Who is it?
It's Diamond. Open up.
How do I know it's Diamond?
Well, you are being cautious. You gave me a $100 retainer. I told you to lock yourself in my office and not to answer to anybody but me.
Did you find out anything?
Close it and lock it.
Is something wrong?
The man who killed Gimpy was wearing a red flower in his buttonhole. I met an old biddy who runs a dancing school, and when I mentioned the flower, she froze up like a clam in a barrel of glue.
Well, Who is this man with the flower?
I don't know, but before he killed Gimpy, he argued with him about some money. $200.
Well, that's the amount I paid Gimpy to hire the assassin.
Yeah. I think the man with the flower is probably your killer. And when I left the dance studio, I found this.
A red rose?
Uh-huh. I think maybe he's tailing me.
He knows I came to see you.
I don't know. I think he's found out I'm looking for him. Maybe figures I'm trying to catch him for killing Gimpy. Anyway, you're not the only one on the spot now.
But what'll we do?
If he's looking for me, there's no sense in letting him find you, too. You got to get out of here.
But where?
Well, an out-of-the-way hotel I know. Manager's a friend of mine.
But what if this killer finds you?
That's a good question. I hustled John Alistair out on the fire escape, and we climbed down to the floor below, just in case our boy with the red rose was waiting outside my office. We climbed into the 7th floor hall, made our way to the service elevator and down to the alley. A half an hour later, I'd deposited Alistair in room number 11 of the Bunker Hill Hotel, in charge of the manager, a one-time safecracker named Herman Clipp. I'd done a lot of favors for Herman, and he assured me Alistair would be safe, and that no one would be allowed to see him unless his name was Diamond, and he had the bluest eyes in the private detective business. It was 6 o'clock by the time I left the hotel, and I kept to the side streets in case the man with the red rose might be close. It was certainly one way of finding him, letting him find me. But I wanted to be ready for it, and I didn't want to be around my client when it happened. I went back to my apartment on 51st Street.
Hello, chum. I've been waiting for you.
Oh, that's nice. Lonesome?
For a while.
You had that nice big gun to keep you company.
Sure.
You forgot to wear your rose.
You got the wrong boy, Diamond. Drago's busy.
Drago?
Name won't do you any good. I'm going to kill you.
Drago's the boy with the red rose?
Turn on the radio.
You were the guy with him in the bar when he killed Gimpy.
That's right. Turn on the radio.
Okay. Look, tell Drago he doesn't have to kill John Alistair. Alistair says to call it off.
The radio.
Oh, sure. Will you tell him?
See, I tell him. But I don't think it's going to do any good. You see, he knows Alistair talked to you. We know you've been trying to find him. And we don't want anybody who can pin Gimpy's killing on us.
I didn't tell Alistair anything.
Sure. Where you got him hidden out, huh? We find out. Drago should have knocked off Gimpy like that, but he gets excited. Like running out of the bar before he knocked off the bartender. If we had knocked off the bartender right then, he couldn't have told you nothing.
What about the bartender?
He's in the river. Turn the radio up.
I turned the radio up slowly, my mind working triple time. The guy behind me wanted the music to cover the noise, like a funeral march with a one-gun salute. I heard him get up behind me.
All right, turn around.
It had to be quick. I turned and gave him the radio right in the face. I had twisted his gun right into his stomach. He looked up at me like a kid who was going to bust out crying because somebody had dumped over his blocks. Then he slid down on his face and died without a sound. I put in a fast call to Walt, told him to check his files for a killer named Drago. I told him what had happened and about the bartender who was probably floating on the river. Then I took off for Bel DeCanto's dance studio. The man I'd just killed had said Drago wasn't going to leave anyone around who might pin the Gimpy killing on him. And Drago had left his red rose on the steps outside of Bel's studio. When I got there, the big dance hall was dark, so I went up another flight to Bel's apartment. Well, here goes. Bel was there all right, and Drago had been there. He hadn't left a rose, but he left a bullet instead. It was somewhere in Bel DeCanto's heart.
The And now Toby Reed with the word to something that is really a matter of life and death. And that is, Toby?
A blowout, Walter. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, a blowout in one of the tires on your automobile. Did you ever stop to think that if you're driving at today's top speed of 35 miles an hour and a blowout swerves your car into an oncoming truck, which travels at the same speed, the resulting crash has a force of 70 miles an hour? Now that's enough to double you right over the steering wheel and push the engine through the dash. Yet there is actually no need for a blowout to throw your car out of control, not if the car is equipped with Goodyear lifeguards. For the lifeguard is an inner tire, a two-ply safety tire within a tube. It replaces the conventional inner tube, and if your outer tire and tube blow, the inner tire of the lifeguard remains inflated, holds the car steady so you can come to a sure, safe stop. That's the kind of blowout protection your family needs, and such sure protection it is that never once has a lifeguard been reported to fail. Never once. Think it over. Ask your Goodyear dealer if he has any of the few lifeguards now available. If so, equip your car with lifeguards, which are now ration-free. For remember, when your tire blows out, the Goodyear lifeguard never lets you down.
And now, back to Richard Diamond, Private Detective, starring Dick Powell.
Well, here's all the information, Rick. The only man we got on file named Drago is a well-known hood named Tommy Drago. 7 arrests, 2 convictions, assault and armed robbery.
Can you find him all?
Well, I put out an APB. Maybe we'll pick him up.
You find the bartender?
They're dragging the river now. The guy in your apartment has been identified as Giulio Basadi. Arrested once with Drago. Supposed to work together.
Yeah.
Why did Drago kill Belle DeCanto?
Well, probably thought I'd told her something.
Now, we gotta get this boy. He's killed 3 people in 2 days.
And he wants to add 2 more to his list. Me and my client.
Where is your client?
Oh, he's staked out in the Bunker Hill Hotel. He's safe.
Well, we better pick him up and give him protection.
He doesn't want the police brought in. But you can stake out a couple of men near the hotel in case Drago shows up.
Right.
Look, Walt, if this Drago likes red roses, he must buy them someplace.
Yeah?
Well, have some men check all the flower shops. Have them circulate the description. For the rest of the day and into the evening, the entire precinct turned out to look for Drago. Each man had a photograph, and they toured every flower store in the city, showing the photograph and asking questions. Walt and I even took one section, wore out a lot of pavement and several good inches of shoe leather, trying to find someone who might have been selling the roses to Drago. By 6 o'clock, we were back in the precinct, discouraged, and, as Walt said...
Oh, I'm beat.
Yeah.
You want some coffee?
Yeah, might as well.
We took in 12 shops. Here.
Thanks.
Looks like the guy grows his own.
Well, maybe he does.
Swell. I'll put out a general to pick up every window box and flower pot in the city. We're bound to catch him in 10 or 12 years. Yeah, what do you want, Spikehead?
Spikehead?
Just thought it up.
Oh.
Well, did you just want to see if the buzzer works?
No, I got an address on that guy Diamond shot.
Giulio Basadi?
Yeah.
Well, do you want us to hold a seance while you give it to us by telepathy?
456 River Street, apartment 7. And you sure are getting grouchy.
Walt and I piled into the squad car and took off for 456 River Street. There was a chance that the man who wore the roses might live with his partner, Giulio Basardi. We found the manager. He led us into the apartment, and after 15 minutes of pretty extensive house wrecking, both Walt and I came to the same conclusion. Giulio Basardi lived alone and liked it. We hit the street pretty discouraged.
Well, come on.
Hey, Walt.
What is it?
Look, that old lady down the street.
What about her?
She's selling flowers.
Oh, well, let's go.
Fresh flowers, 20 cents a bunch. Flowers, gentlemen?
Do you have some red roses?
Yes.
Single red roses that I could wear in my lapel?
Yes, 25 cents.
Have you ever seen this man?
What man?
Here.
Yes, Mr. Drago. I sell him a red rose every evening, fresh.
You know where we can find him?
Well, what do you want him for?
Police.
Has Mr. Drago done something?
He's wanted for murder.
Oh, no, how terrible. He seemed like such a nice man, so generous, he dressed so nicely.
He's killed 3 people.
3 people.
Do you know where he lives?
3 people. Yes, he lives in the next block. I don't know the number. I'll have to show you.
Here, I'll take all the flowers you've got. The old flower woman showed us the building, and again we dragged another manager out to let us into Drago's apartment. This time we went in low, ready to shoot if Drago happened to be home. He wasn't. And once again, we tore another place apart.
Find anything?
No, not yet.
Get a load of this closet. Drago really dresses.
Hey, Walt.
Yeah? You find something?
Look at this telephone pad.
What about it?
The writing. Read it.
Bunker Hill.
Bunker Hill Hotel. That's where my client is. Drago's found him. Walt, go check for the men you got staked out and see if they spotted Drago going in. I'll go in and see if my client's all right.
Right.
Herman. Herman. Oh.
Rick?
Over here, Walt. Herman is out cold.
Herman?
Yeah, the manager.
Oh, he looks pretty bad.
Yeah, he's really out.
Drago?
Your men see anybody?
No, but he could have slipped in.
Now, let's get up to my client.
Well, come on.
I'm looking for the key.
What room?
11. Now, let's go on. I had my client locked in. Come on. 2nd floor. Here it is. Alistair. Alistair, it's Diamond.
Diamond, get me out of here. He's been here. He's got a key.
Where is he?
He tried to get in, but I had the chain lock on. Then he tried to break it down. I pushed the furniture in front of the door. Get me out, please.
Just take it easy. We'll try and break it down.
The furniture's still there.
Well, get it out of the way.
Yes. I don't know where he went.
Is there a fire escape?
Fire escape? Yes. There's an escape right outside my window. Good heavens, Diamond.
Just keep moving the furniture.
But the fire escape...
Just move the furniture. Walt.
Yeah?
You stay here. I'm going out on the fire escape. It figured. If Drago couldn't get past the furniture, he'd get in another way. I ran to the end of the hall and out on the escape. I turned the corner of the building and started for my client's room.
He's on the escape. He's coming down. I can hear him. Get me out. Get me out.
At first, I thought my client had heard just me. But then I saw him climbing down from the floor above, a gun in his hand, the polished barrel shining in the moonlight. As he reached the window, Alistair went crazy.
He's outside the window. No, please.
I leaned against the building and steadied my arm just as he broke the window.
No.
You killed him. You killed him.
Yeah. Funny.
What, Mr. Diamond?
Shot him right through his red rose.
But now, 2 points that'll pay every driver to remember if you want to be sure you're getting the tops in quality when you buy gasoline. 1. In gasoline, it takes extra quality to give you extra mileage, to go farther. And 2, Signal is the famous Go Farther gasoline. After all, the only way any gasoline can put more thrilling performance into your car is by helping your motor run more efficiently. And when your motor runs more efficiently, naturally you get better mileage. So mileage is really the best yardstick of gasoline quality. That's why we're so proud of Signal's good mileage. And it's why Signal says, when you buy gasoline for your car, to be sure you're getting the tops in quality, there are just 2 things to remember. 1, in gasoline, it takes extra quality to go farther. And 2, throughout the West, from Canada to Mexico, Signal is the famous Go Farther gasoline.
Dick Powell can now be seen starring in the RKO film Cry Danger. Tonight's adventure of Richard Diamond was written by Blake Edwards with music by Frank Worth. Our director is Helen Mack. Featured in the cast were Virginia Gregg, Wilms Herbert, and Arthur Q. Bryan.
Man, I love Richard Diamond. Not only for the great stories, but the writing is off the charts. All of the stories for the show were written by the incredible Blake Edwards. He was a film director, producer, and screenwriter. He began his career in the 1940s as an actor, but he soon began writing screenplays and radio scripts before turning to producing and directing in television and films. His best-known films include Breakfast at Tiffany's, Days of Wine and Roses, The Great Race, and the hugely successful Pink Panther series of films with British actor Peter Sellers. Blake was often thought primarily as a director of comedies, but he also directed several dramas, musicals, and of course, detective films. In 2004, he received an honorary Academy Award in recognition of his extraordinary body of work. I am here to tell you that I am a huge fan of Mr. Blake Edwards. One only has to watch one of the Pink Panther films to find out just how amazing he was.
Johnny, is this true?
As you know by now, I like to surf the internet to find the strange and unusual. I do this in the name of the podcast, but the truth is, I would do it anyway, even if there was no podcast. What you're about to hear is...
Johnny, is this true?
I will tell you a story and then ask the question, did I make it up or is it true? Your job is to decide. Let's get started.
Johnny, is this true?
This time on Johnny, Is It True, we're revisiting the world of the private investigator. What I'm going to do is give you a story, and you have to decide if it's real or from the plot of a fictional detective story. Usually when I do this, I have at least one fake story. This time, who can say? Let's get started. Story 1. In colonial Melbourne, Australia, two men named Oliver White and Roger Moreland are in a public house having discussion with White lamenting over his circumstances. After stumbling drunk through the streets, Oliver eventually collapses in a stupor, where he's helped by a man who recognizes him into a hansom cab. Awakening in the cab, he tries to make sense of things, but is soon killed through the use of a chloroform rag by White. He steals a paper from Oliver's jacket and flees the scene using another cab. After a long investigation, White is eventually captured and pays for his crime. Is this plot or fiction? Well, this one is pure fiction. It was from the story The Mystery of a Hansom Cab by Fergus Hume, published in the same year as Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and a full year before the first Sherlock Holmes novel. Gotta love a good detective story. Story 2. Michael Caine had a phone call from a West African acquaintance. He was told his life was being threatened and that he intended to defy the people who were threatening him. He said, "If you don't hear from me in the next 3 weeks, I want you to give the police this information." He gave Caine the name and address of the man who was coming after him. Time went by and he heard nothing from him. So he visited the offices of the Sydney Morning Herald and went through their papers for the past few weeks, looking for clues. There was a story about an unidentified body which had been found on a golf course. He looked into it and found that the body was the man that had contacted him. He turned in the information, and the case was solved. Now, this sounds like an episode of the 2019 TV series Michael Caine. Is it? It is not. This is from the very real case files of Michael Caine, who is a PI in Sydney, Australia. Proof that life does sometimes imitate art. Story 3. In King's Abbot, a wealthy widow, Miss Ferres, unexpectedly commits suicide, distressing her fiancé, Roger Ackroyd. At dinner that evening in Ackroyd's home, he has a number of friends over to start the grieving process for Ferres. But that is a cover, because Ackroyd is sure that his girl was murdered, and he knows who. However, he is murdered before he can announce who the killer is. He is stabbed to death with a weapon from his own collection. A detective is called in, and before the evening is through, he finds the killer. Fiction plot, or did this happen? Well, it did happen in an Agatha Christie novel titled The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Now, that detective that was brought in was none other than the famous Hercule Poirot. How about that? Story 4. Detective Frederick Brown was called to a scene where a murder had been committed. The place had been meticulously cleaned, and the forensic team couldn't find a single clue. However, Fred was able to solve the case. The body was found in an easy chair and had been shot. The bullet taken from the body was a musket ball. The killer thought that using an antique weapon would leave no way to track ballistics. He was dead wrong, and Martin Pollock was charged with murder. Is this one a plot or a newspaper headline? Well, this is a real story taken from the pages of the New York Herald. The murder occurred on March 30th, 1986, and Martin is still in prison today for the crime. How about that? Well, I hope that you enjoyed this special Johnny Is It True? Don't you just love a good detective story? I know that I do. That was episode number 585, and if you're counting, that is a big number. Silas Hellmond gave us his story today, and I have to say, I loved it. Thank you, Silas. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button helps us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.